The man stood in my living room. He held a thick envelope. His eyes were cold, like polished stones. He said my name. He said this house, my home for 40 years, was no longer mine. He said I had to leave. My mind reeled. What was he talking about? How could this be? What dark secret had taken root in the quiet corners of my life? I stared at him, then at the papers he presented. My name was there, scrawled clumsily, a caricature of my usual elegant signature. It was a signature I could not recall ever making. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. I had been unwell. A fall. A concussion. Months of foggy days blurring into one another. My memory was a patchwork quilt, some squares vibrant, others faded to oblivion. But this was a whole piece missing. This was a gaping hole where my life should be. Had I signed something? Some document giving away everything I owned? Or was this something far more insidious? A betrayal so profound I could not even comprehend it. Who would do such a thing? What monster would try to steal my life from under me, especially when my own mind was already a treacherous landscape? My daughter, Sarah, rushed in. Then, her face a mask of panic. She saw the man, the papers, my bewildered expression. Her eyes darted to mine, then to the man, then to the floor. There was a flicker of something in them, a fear I recognized, but also something else, something I could not name. She quickly ushered the man out, her voice a hushed urgency. She returned to me, forcing a smile, her hands on my trembling shoulders. Mother, it's nothing, just a misunderstanding, a mistake. You know how things are with your memory sometimes. David is handling everything. He's so good with all the paperwork. Her words were meant to soothe, but they grated. David, my son-in-law, always so helpful, so efficient. Too efficient, perhaps. What was she hiding? What was Buster? He hiding? What terrible truth lay beneath the surface of her frantic assurances? The days that followed were a blur of uneasy, quiet, and growing dread. The man with the cold eyes did not return immediately. But his words, his assertion of my impending homelessness, echoed in the silent chambers of my fractured memory. Sarah became even more vigilant, hovering, anticipating my questions before I could even voice them. She insisted on preparing all my meals, ensuring I took my medication, managing all my appointments. "It's for your own good, Mother," she would say, her voice firm. "We just want you to recover, to not worry about a thing." But I worried. I worried constantly. The house itself felt different, the air heavy with an unspoken truth. A painting that had always hung in the hallway was gone, replaced by a generic print. My antique desk, a cherished family heirloom, was no longer in the study. A simpler, more modern one in its place. When I asked Sarah about these things, she would dismiss them as minor changes, things I must be imagining, or items that had been moved for safekeeping. Safekeeping from whom? I wondered. From myself? David, my son-in-law, was a shadow in the background, yet his presence was constant. He was always on his phone, always talking in hushed tones in the study, always seemingly busy with my affairs. He would bring me documents to sign, always urging me to do so quickly, without reading them. Just a formality. "Mother," he'd say, flashing his practiced, charming smile, "for your medical care, your pension, nothing to worry your pretty little head about." He would guide my hand, sometimes literally, when I hesitated, my hand shaking with a fear I couldn't quite articulate. My memory might have been a sieve, but my instincts, dulled as they were, screamed a warning. Something was deeply wrong. The small discrepancies were piling up, each one a pebble dropped into a vast, dark well. My bank statements no longer arrived. My mail, once a daily ritual I cherished, was now always intercepted by Sarah or David, They claimed it was to prevent me from getting stressed. I felt more stressed than ever, suffocating under their well-meaning, yet oppressive, care. One afternoon, while Sarah was out grocery shopping and David was at his office, which I now suspected was just a cover for other activities, I decided to act. The house was quiet, save for the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hall. It was a silence that used to comfort me, but now it felt like an accomplice to the secrets being kept. I crept into the study, the room David now claimed as his own. His computer was on, a screen full of numbers and legal jargon I did not understand. But then my eyes caught a folder, lying slightly askew on his desk. It was labeled Estate of Eleanor Vance. My name. My heart hammered against my ribs. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were more papers, official-looking documents, and amongst them, photocopies of my signature. Dozens of them. Each one slightly different, a clumsy attempt to replicate my hand. My breath hitched. This was it. This was the proof. He was forging my signature. It wasn't my memory playing tricks on me. It was deliberate. I shuffled through the papers, my eyes scanning for any familiar detail. There was a deed, a transfer of ownership document for this very house, and only. And below it, a signature. Not mine. An imitation. A shiver ran down my spine, cold and sickening. He was stealing my home. He was stealing my life. And Sarah, my own daughter, was either complicit or incredibly naive. The thought was a dagger to my heart. I wanted to scream, to cry, but no sound escaped my throat. My vision blurred. I felt a dizzying wave of nausea wash over me. I quickly put the folder back, trying to make it look untouched. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped it. I stumbled out of the study, my legs weak, and retreated to my room. I needed to think. I needed to understand. But my mind was a battlefield, memories fighting against the horrifying reality. The next few days were a blur of internal agony. I couldn't look at David without seeing a thief. I couldn't look at Sarah without seeing a betrayer. The meals they brought me tasted like ash. Their smiles felt like venom. I had to find a way to get help, to expose them. But who would believe me? A woman with a damaged memory. A woman whose own daughter vouched for her incompetence. I felt trapped, a prisoner in my own home, a hostage to my own mind. I began to hoard small things. A pen, a piece of paper, a book of matches from an old restaurant. Small tools for a fight I knew I had to wage alone. My memory was slowly, agonizingly, starting to return in fragments. Not coherent narratives, but flashes of emotion, faces, conversations. I remembered arguing with David about money, about his extravagant spending. I remembered Sarah looking uncomfortable, caught between her husband and her mother. I remembered expressing my concerns about David's business ventures, which always seemed to fail, always seemed to require more money. My money. The pieces began to click into place, forming a terrifying mosaic of greed and manipulation. One evening, I feigned a sudden headache, asking for a cup of tea and some quiet time. Sarah, ever the dutiful nurse, went to the kitchen. David, preoccupied with a phone call in the study, was oblivious. This was my chance. I needed external proof. I needed to contact someone outside this house. My old friend, Martha. She lived across town. We used to talk every week. I hadn't heard from her in months. I knew why now. They had cut me off. I stumbled out of my room, heart pounding, towards the landline in the living room. Sarah had moved my mobile phone, claiming I kept losing it. I fumbled with the old rotary phone, my fingers struggling with the familiar numbers. As I dialed, I heard the faint click of the study door opening. David. I froze, my hand hovering over the last digit. He emerged, his eyes narrowed. Mother, what are you doing? You should be resting. His voice was sharper than usual, a subtle edge of suspicion. I quickly hung up, my face burning. Just fetching a book, I lied, gesturing vaguely to the bookshelf. He watched me for a long moment, then turned back to the study. My heart raced. That was too close. I realized I couldn't directly confront them. Not yet. I needed hard evidence, something undeniable. I also needed to regain more of my memory, to be able to recount the events with clarity. So, I started a clandestine operation. I began to write things down in a small, hidden notebook I had found, tucked away in an old sewing box. I wrote down the changes I noticed, the suspicious statements, the dates when David asked me to sign papers. I even tried to replicate my own signature from memory, comparing it to the forgeries I had glimpsed. The differences were stark. My true signature was fluid, confident. The forgeries were hesitant, almost childish. Weeks passed in this agonizing dance of deception. I played the part of the confused, compliant, invalid. I let them believe my memory was still a muddled mess. But inside, a steel resolve was forming. The fragments of memory were coalescing into a coherent picture. I remembered inheriting a significant sum from my late husband, investing it carefully, setting up trusts for Sarah and her children. I remembered discussing my will with David and Sarah, how I wanted my assets divided fairly, a considerable portion going to Day 2, charities I supported. I remembered David's disappointment, his barely concealed anger at the mention of charities. He had always been ambitious, always wanting more, but I had never imagined he would sink to this. One day, David left his study door ajar after a phone call. I heard him say, "It's all set. The transfer is complete. She won't remember a thing." My blood ran cold. The transfer, my assets, my home, it was all gone. I felt a surge of adrenaline, mixed with a wave of despair. There was no more time for quiet investigations. I had to act. That evening, I waited until they were both asleep. The house was utterly silent, a perfect canvas for my desperate plan. I crept out of my room, my heart pounding, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew where David kept his spare car keys, hidden in a ceramic pot by the back door. He always boasted about his clever hiding places. I retrieved them, my fingers trembling. The cold metal felt like a weapon in my hand. I needed to get out, to find help. But where? And how? My mind raced. I couldn't drive. My license had been suspended after my accident. Even if it hadn't, I hadn't driven in months. But I remembered the bus stop. It was just a few blocks away. My legs felt like lead, but I pushed myself forward. I dressed quickly, pulling on an old coat, stuffing my hidden notebook into my pocket. As I tiptoed towards the back door, a thought struck me. My purse. It had some emergency cash, my old identification. I found it tucked away in the back of my closet, exactly where I had hidden it months ago, before the memory loss truly took hold. A small victory, a tiny thread of continuity in the chaos. Stepping out into the cool night air was exhilarating and terrifying. The freedom felt alien, yet wonderfully familiar. I walked as fast as my frail legs would carry me, looking over my shoulder every few seconds, expecting to see David's car pulling up behind me. The bus stop was deserted. A faint street lamp cast long, eerie shadows. My breath plumed in the cold air. A bus finally arrived, its bright lights a beacon of hope. I boarded, paid with the crumpled bills from my purse, and sank into a seat near the window. I had no specific destination, just a desperate need to get away, to reach someone, anyone, who could help me. I ended up at an all-night diner, a place I vaguely remembered visiting years ago. The smell of stale coffee and frying bacon was oddly comforting. I ordered a hot chocolate, my hands still shaking as I gripped the warm mug. I pulled out my notebook, rereading my frantic scribbles. The name of my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was there, and his phone number. My heart leaped. This was my chance. I borrowed a phone from the diner owner, explaining my predicament in a hushed and nervous voice. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and skepticism, but he let me use the phone. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity. Finally, a sleepy voice answered. It was Mr. Henderson's answering service. I left a desperate message, explaining, as best I could, what was happening, begging him to call me back immediately. I gave the diner's number. It was all I could do. I sat there, sipping my hot chocolate, waiting, hoping, praying. Hours later, as dawn was just breaking, my phone call came. Mr. Henderson. His voice was grave. Mrs. Vance. I've been trying to reach you. I've been very concerned. Your daughter told me you were too unwell to speak with anyone, and that she and Mr. Vance were managing all your affairs. My heart sank further. They had even managed to deceive my lawyer. I explained everything. The memory loss, the forged signatures, the eviction notice, the documents I had seen in David's study. I poured out my story, my voice thick with emotion. Mr. Henderson listened patiently, his occasional, indicating he was taking it all in. This is very serious, Mrs. Vance, he finally said. I need to see you in person. Can you come to my office? We need to begin legal proceedings immediately. I've already tried to block some of the transactions David Vance has initiated, but he seems to have moved very quickly. A glimmer of hope. A tangible path forward. I arranged for a taxi to take me to his office. The journey was a blur. When I finally arrived, Mr. Ben Henderson was waiting. He looked older, more tired than I remembered. He greeted me with a solemn nod and led me into his office. We spent hours going over the details, my fragmented memories slowly piecing together with his records. He showed me copies of documents David had filed, documents with my name, but signatures that were clearly not mine, especially when compared to samples of my true signature he had on file. The sheer audacity of it all was staggering. David had systematically stripped me of everything: my home, my investments, my savings, my entire legacy. The confrontation with Sarah was inevitable, but it was far more painful than any legal battle could be. Mr. Henderson had advised me to have an officer present for my safety. They arrived at the house, a small group, including Mr. Henderson, a police officer, and myself. The front door was unlocked. We walked in, and the silence was deafening. Sarah and David were in the living room, David on his phone, Sarah looking through a magazine. They looked up, their faces registering shock, then dawning horror, as they saw the officer, then me. Mother, what is this? What have you done? Sarah's voice was a shaky whisper. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and accusation. I looked at her, my heart aching with a pain I hadn't thought possible. What have now I done, Sarah? What have you done? What have you both done? My voice was hoarse, but steady. You tried to steal everything from me. My home, my life. You betrayed me. Your own mother. David stood up, his face hardening. This is ridiculous. She's clearly confused. Officer, her memory, you know. She doesn't know what she's saying. I've been taking care of her, managing her affairs, with her full consent. He flashed his charming smile, but it faltered under the officer's steady gaze. Mr. Henderson stepped forward. Mr. Vance, we have substantial evidence of fraudulent activity, including forged signatures on multiple legal documents, property deeds, and financial transfers. We also have Mrs. Vance's sworn testimony. Sarah gasped. Her eyes flew to David, then back to me. No, David, tell me this isn't true. Her voice was a plea, filled with desperation. David's composure finally cracked. He glared at me, his eyes filled with a cold, venomous hatred. You old fool. You were just in the way. Always hoarding your money. I deserved it. Sarah deserved it. You wouldn't have known the difference anyway, with your broken mind. That was it. The final, crushing blow. The full, unvarnished truth. It wasn't just about the money. It was about contempt. A complete disregard for my humanity. My very existence. Sarah burst into tears. A raw, guttural sound of anguish. She hadn't known the full extent. Not the outright forgery. She had been naive, perhaps willfully blind. But David had been the orchestrator, the true betrayer. She looked at me, her face streaked with tears, a silent plea for forgiveness in her eyes. But the chasm between us felt too wide, too deep to bridge. The betrayal was too profound. The legal battle was long and arduous. It was a humiliating process, having my mental competency questioned, my life laid bare in a courtroom. But with Mr. Henderson's unwavering support and the clear evidence of forgery, the truth prevailed. David was charged with fraud and forgery. Sarah was not directly implicated in the forgery, but her complicity in isolating me and allowing David free rein over my finances led to a severe reprimand and a damaged reputation. My assets were slowly, painstakingly, returned. The house was mine again. But the victory felt hollow. My relationship with Sarah was shattered beyond repair. She tried to apologize, to explain, to beg for forgiveness. But her words felt like echoes in an empty room. I saw her only a few times after that, the pain in her eyes mirroring my own. We were mother and daughter, but we were strangers now, separated by a betrayal that had left an indelible scar. She had chosen her husband's greed over her mother's trust. I learned a harsh lesson about family, about trust, about the insidious nature of greed. My memory never fully returned to its former sharpness, but the clarity I gained about human nature was absolute. I rebuilt my life, piece by painful piece. I sold the big house, too full of ghosts and bitter memories, and moved into a smaller, cozier place. I reconnected with Martha, who had been frantic with worry when she couldn't reach me. Her presence was a balm to my wounded soul. I found solace in my garden, in the quiet rhythm of growth and renewal. Sometimes, a flicker of an old memory would surface, a happy moment with Sarah as a child, David charming me with his wit. But those memories were always tainted by the shadow of what came after. The old woman who lost her memory found her strength. She found her voice. She found justice. But the cost was immeasurable. The loss of a daughter's love, the shattering of a family bond, was a wound that time could never fully heal. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest betrayals come from those closest to us, and that the silence of complicity can be just as deafening as the roar of deceit. My name was Eleanor Vance, and I had survived. But I was forever changed, a testament to the fact that even when the mind forgets, the heart remembers the deepest scars.